the home of inspiration every day.
Most people give up on themselves easily. You know the human spirit is powerful.
From news,
Countries across the globe have been hit by the COVID-19 virus.
views,
There's a global trend to see an increase in GBV incidences, specifically domestic violence.
sports,
What's he say? It's a really good ball. It's Shabalala.
and music to inspire you every day. This is Vuka Online, your inspiration radio station.
Hi there and welcome to Healthcare Hour with Colleen Qvist. I know that you've had an amazing week and I've had so many messages from all of you, so thank you for all of those. And yes, I do really enjoy your interaction with the show because sometimes, you know, when you work on radio, it feels like you're just talking to no one, but I'm glad that you're all out there. And a special hello to everybody in the USA because today my guest is from that side of the world. But let's speak about Healthcare Hour. You know that this show is all about healthcare professionals. It's about us understanding that they are people. They get tired, they get hungry, they have families that they would like to see. It's also about us improving the relationship between the healthcare professional and the patient. And of course, as the patient, and unfortunately at some point in our lives, we are the patient. We need to be educated. We need to know what's happening. As you know, June is all about healthcare. It's about us remembering about mental health care specifically. And so after the break, we'll meet my guest. So let's go for that break.
The home of inspiration every day.
Most people give up on themselves easily. You know the human spirit is powerful.
From news,
Countries across the globe have been hit by the COVID-19 virus.
views,
There's a global trend to see an increase in GBV incidences, specifically domestic violence.
sports,
What's he say? It's a really good ball. It's Shabalala.
and music to inspire you every day. This is Vuka Online, your inspiration radio station.
Welcome back. You're listening to Healthcare Hour with Colleen Qvist. My guest today is Professor Shay Welch. Hi. No, we're not going to call you Prof. We're going to call you Shay. Hi, Shay.
Yeah.
Thank you for joining me.
Hi, I'm glad to be here all the way over on that side of the pond.
Yes, on that side of the pond. So you are the Associate Professor of Philosophy at Spelman College, and that is in Atlanta, Georgia.
Yes, it is a small private liberal arts college for all women of color.
Okay. All right. And so just to give a little bit of background, but of course we're going to go diving into your background with you because this show is about people, not titles. Just to share with the audience that you have written 5 books. Well, your 5th book's in its about to be published stage. Lots of anthology chapters, peer review articles. You've given numerous keynotes, presentations, and interviews. And also you received fellowships and awards, many of them. For the people who haven't seen your CV, it's numerous pages long. But of course, I know the person and I wanted to share who Shay is with people. So help us understand who Shay.
Well, I guess there are many versions of Shay. There is certainly Prof Shay, and there was athlete Shay and music lover Shay. So it's been interesting because I'm interested in so many very divergent kinds of areas that I've almost had to compartmentalize different aspects of myself because they don't cross over well. And so, you know, people who know me in academia know a very different version of me than people who know me, say, like in the motorcycle racing area. So, you know, was a circus performer, I was a motorcycle racer, you know, I'm a scholar, I'm very into the nightlife, very into music and the music scene and live music. So it's interesting to carve out so many different avenues of expression. And so I guess if there's one way to describe me, it would be um, curious and multiply interested.
Yes, and when you think of it, I mean, not only are you curious and multiply interested, you've taken the circus on one side and the professor on the other side. I mean, you couldn't get more diametrically opposite kinds of approaches if you tried.
Yes, and I think one of the things that makes my work as a scholar unique is that I write all of my academic work is about all of my personal life. So all of my personal history are in my books and chapters, and my work in circus, I've already written 2 books about that. I've created movement methods. The book that I'm doing for In Progress now has a lot to do with performance art. And I use first person approach to almost everything that I write. And for the most part, that's very different from how most other philosophers produce their work. But I've just always seen myself as feeling that the only way that I can do anything that matters is to write about something that matters to me and hope that it connects to other people who, also share similar experiences.
So I'd be right in saying that you don't just churn out ARB research or write ARB books that are like for those kind of people. It's about you and your story.
Yeah, and the interesting thing is that my academic people, or not my academic people, my academic people are great, but those academic people would say
Yes.
that my work is the odd, that I churn out the odd stuff because it's so different than what is the standard expectation, you know. But in my circle, it's celebrated. And one of the interesting things that I've learned is that people who are outside academia or people who are on the boundaries of academia really love my work. And they come to me not for my analytic side of the work, but for my personal relationship to the work. And that is one of the ways in which I've done all of these interviews, is because people have caught wind of what I'm doing and they just want to hear about why I'm doing this and ask me to share more about that experience to people. And I'm able to do that in what I hope is a more accessible way to share philosophy.
Yes.
I love philosophy so much that I like to share philosophy with other people, and what better way to do that than to be able to filter it through like my lived experience.
Yeah, and I suppose philosophy, well, all of your science subjects really do have creative people in it, but often the creative side is squished. And it's like, oh no, we must just be scientists. We mustn't be creative people. And so it's amazing to see you bring them together and make them normal.
It's true. I mean, it doesn't make me famous in the discipline. You know what I mean? It doesn't make me the most desirable speaker. It doesn't make me the most desirable invited guest. I think sometimes it turns a lot of academics off. And I'm okay with that because I'm the one that has to live with me and the computer. You know what I mean? I write to live, and I don't write to be somebody's guest speaker. So if
Yes.
where it's appreciated, I like to be in those spaces. And I would hate to have to do this really sterile work that has very limited, application, just to have more of a bigger name within,
Yes.
say like the American Philosophical Association or the Philosophical Congress, globally. And I've got my spaces. I'm actually affiliated with a couple of academic journals in South Africa. which is
Oh,
interesting. So, I get around, but I'm not
yeah.
the person in philosophy, and that's fine with me.
Well, this show and certainly me, we celebrate real. And so thank you for bringing real Shay. Yes. Of course, the audience, the listeners will say, oh, ask her, what did she do in the circus? I know what
Okay.
you did in the circus, but let's hear from you.
Yeah, so I was an aerialist, and I did very low level, local level, sort of like the Cirque du Soleil stuff, right? I did a lot of stuff that people are used to seeing. I don't know, people will call them the curtains, like the two things um, that they tie up in and they do the splits. That's
Okay,
yeah.
yes.
Okay, yeah. So I would do something like that, except for mine was in a circle, so I was able to
Okay.
do a lot of swinging. And then I worked with a rope, a single rope that just hung by itself, which is something that people see more in the traditional traveling circus. Um, so anyone who's been to a big tent circus would probably have seen a rope, whereas the silks people would see more in like the Cirque du Soleil, the French style circus. Um, and I didn't get into circus until I was in my mid 30s. I was never in a place that even had the opportunity to do that. So as soon as I moved to a place that had it, I immediately jumped in. And so I was able to get good for my age, right? So one of the things that I was able to do is really use my philosophical brain and go into trying to understand the philosophy of movement, right? And all of the different relationships to the way that the material could be shaped and moved. And in doing that, I was able to start doing original choreography. And then I started being able to use that to write philosophy. And then I would take the philosophy that I wrote, and then I would do lectures for circus festivals for the big time performers, and explain to them different ways of using movement for creating choreography. And it was just, I performed a little bit, I trained a whole lot, I spent a lot of time, we call it noodling around, spinning around, trying to go from here to there. And that was my relationship to the circus.
So you're not, having joined only in your 30s. It's not like the little girl who said, I'm running away to join the circus. Yeah, I don't know if that's still a thing, if people still run away to join the circus.
They do. But interestingly, it's very hard to enter the circus if you don't have any kind of relationship to it. So a lot of times the people that I know who were young and ran away to the circus were ballerinas.
Okay.
Ballerinas who were like, I'm tired of being abused by my trainer. And I know that there's a circus, so they ran away to the circus. Rhythmic gymnast, people who were in these sort of performative acrobatic spheres were able when they were younger to take that and then go into the circus instead, because it was healthier and friendlier and more creative and more expressive for
Yes.
diverse people. And then you have those of us who, and of course, usually it was people in their 20s, but that was because I moved to a place that had it. So you would have these, young women who were finding it at like 21 and 22, and they were getting into it and then they became performers. And so there's a handful of us. There's like 3 of us who found it in our elder years. And we just played along with the younger ones
Yes.
and did what we could.
Awesome. Okay, so let's go for a break. When we come back, we're going to hear about your philosophical side, more stories, your own health. But let's go for a break.
How do you know the life of personal coach you're about to work with is who they say they are? How do you know if they can do the job? At the Africa Board for Coaching, Consulting and Coaching Psychology, we can tell you. So, before you share your secrets and spend your money, check with us first. Visit www.abccccp.com or call us on 012-751-7608. The ABCCP, the professional body for coaches.
Welcome back. You're listening to Healthcare Hour with Colleen Qvist. My guest today is Professor Shay Welch. She is the Associate Professor of Philosophy at Spelman College, which is in Atlanta, Georgia. And she's been sharing with us how she's brought in all her passions and all her different interests. And she's written academic articles with an eye and bringing in her own lived experience, which of course hasn't always made her everyone's cup of tea. But we don't deal with cups of tea here. Yes. So we enjoy exotic and real and authentic.
That's me.
Definitely. Okay. So, all right. So let's look at some more of your passions and your interests. And, you know, I know that you've written a lot about mental health, and of course you've brought the eye into that.
Yeah. It's one of the things that in academia, disability studies is very marginalized. But even within disability studies, there are things that are marginalized, and that is certain kinds of mental illness, which is borderline personality disorder, schizoaffective disorder, bipolar. And there's just the new work coming in on neurodivergency, but it's very centered on, the way that ADHD works or autism. There's a lot of work on depression, especially like in philosophy of disability. There's a lot of work on depression. Of course, you have your work on euthanasia and assisted living, critiques of nursing homes, assisted care. But people don't really talk about these kinds of mental health disorders because they're still very stigmatized. And the interesting thing about these kinds of disorders is that because they're tied to personality so strongly, they're still tied very deeply to conceptions about people ought to be able to control themselves. And if you
What's wrong
can't,
with them?
yes. So if you can't control yourself, then you need to medicate as much as you possibly can and do whatever you possibly can to make sure that your behavior is socially appropriate. And I have always been very open about being, borderline. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I've had my diagnosis my whole life. I never saw anything wrong with it. I didn't even realize how stigmatized it was until I started doing research on it to write more scholarly stuff on it. It was just me. It was just, it was a way of capturing a lifelong experience and a whole messy mix of personality traits that I just knew were true. Like, these are true things about me. I didn't know the way that psychiatrists looked at it. I just didn't know. I just had no idea that anyone in the medical profession would look at anyone so horribly and with such disdain and disgust. I remember reading my first few philosophy of psychiatry papers and crying and thinking, how could anybody think something like that about me? And realizing that the only people that they were using as evidence were the people who were hospitalized and institutionalized. And it's true that we have very difficult times dealing with our emotions, but it's a very small percentage of us that become institutionalized, and there's nothing wrong with being institutionalized. But when somebody gets institutionalized, they are at their lowest point. And then to describe an entire population of people who've had, very difficult lives, and to describe them according to people's lowest moments of despair is, I mean, it's beyond unethical. It's I mean, that's the kind of stuff that I would assume people would get their license revoked for. Like that's just mischaracterization and bad data gathering. But before I was even writing scholarly, I was very open, and when people would interview me, I would always talk about it, and I would be like, people think I'm kind of messy and I'm kind of loud, and this is, I have borderline, and this is just a way of understanding me. And I always thought it was really important to say it out loud to show other people that they shouldn't be ashamed, and that also you can have difficulties and you can be occasionally socially misbehaved, and you can still be very smart, and that's okay. And so that's sort of how I got into this.
Yeah. If I can ask you, Shay, then, what are the symptoms, the typical symptoms? But as you said, obviously continuum of symptoms, not like, geez, now every single person is going to have this at this level. But what are the symptoms of borderline personality?
The one way that I describe it that captures it and that doesn't make it sound like a moral problem is that people have lived, for the most part, most people who have borderline personality disorder grew up in a certain kind of lifestyle that was unstable and insecure. And so that makes it very hard to regulate your emotions because you never know when to feel safe.
Okay.
And you also, when you're happy and excited, you are really happy and excited. It's almost like because you usually were making it on your own, nobody taught you how to force your emotions down. So like there's no limit to how loud you should laugh when something is hilarious, or there's no limit on how deeply you should wail if something is, causing deep grief. And I think that's okay. I think that's okay, but it's very difficult for other people to understand because it's not normal. People are taught to control their emotions very early, and they're policed throughout social development to do that. Whereas people with borderline who don't do that oftentimes get pushed to the margins. And so they don't get policed and trained, they get excluded. And so you just continue to develop in that way and think like, oh, well, I guess people just don't like me. And then so you have all of these other issues of not knowing when to trust relationships, and you get attachment issues, like you get really attached to people and then you get overwhelmed by it and then you run away from the relationship.
So I imagine relationships are quite hard then, or not. But relationships are hard.
And I think that's one of the things that people are really unfair about, because when I think about this behavior, I see everybody doing this in the dating world. Like, I'm a professor and I watch these college students date. And since the dawn of me being in a classroom with, 18 and 21-year-olds, it's the same story. It's just that we are louder about it. And we get more worked up about it. And so that's kind of what it is that we don't we don't usually behave much different than the way that quote, quote, normal people behave. We just do it louder and more deeply, you know. We take it, you know, if most people are running at a 7 or an 8, we're running at an 11. That's, you know, and that's where
It's just amped expression of emotion.
yeah, I would say so. And it is true to learn how to control your emotions, but it really is the case that very early on, you know, if you're raised in an insecure environment, you are training yourself. You're training yourself in that situation, how to manage emotionally in that situation. And then you're trying to translate into social relationships and social environments, and it doesn't translate well. And so you just get excluded. So there is, even from very early on, there's just none of this emotional training that most people get to become normalized.
So you're finding as well, before we go for a break as well, it's just that instead of like, well, let's get her to fit in, it's like, no, hell no, just don't invite her.
That happens a lot. Nobody
No, we
wants
can't
to
risk
invite
it.
you.
We can't risk it. We don't know what she will do.
That's exactly right.
I don't know
We
what
can't
happened to
risk
your
it.
invitation. It went away.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yep.
very sad. Yes. But it's good that you're then working about, you know, sharing your lived experience, but not only in stories, but also in academic journals, that you're sharing your lived experience, because we all know that, you know, the discrimination and the issues that go with mental health conditions are improved by people who share their lived experience.
Yeah, there's a group of us who are trying to fight back against the very popular and well-funded philosophers of psychiatry and philosophers of psychotherapy. And there's a whole area of philosophy of psychopathology, and it's all of these people who have none of these diagnoses talking about the ethical problems of people with these diagnoses. And
Yeah.
some of us are getting together and we are very displeased about it. And so we've been working very hard to put out publications to counter all of these philosophers who are well respected in the field and considered, you know, the exemplars. And we get a lot of pushback. A lot of but we're like, I mean, we've dealt with it forever. So they're gonna insult us one way or the other. So we might as well respond.
Yes. Okay, let's go for a break. When we come back, we're going to continue on your passions and your future. But let's go for a break.
The Africa Center for Work-Based Learning is a professional development center for professionals who aim to improve their professional standing. This means that the learning programs we run are more than just academic programs. They are work-based programs that focus on leveraging your current experience as a professional to build your overall profile. A year down the line, the Africa Center for Work-Based Learning is developing into a preferred center for professional development in Pretoria, with 8 professional development faculties including accounting, teaching, entrepreneurship, as well as IT and many more. For more information, go to acwbl.org or dial +27 12 751 7608. The Africa Center for Work-Based Learning, where work is learning.
Welcome back. You're listening to Healthcare Hour with Colleen Qvist. My guest today is the very bouncy Professor Shay Welch. Yes, very vivacious. I think that's the word, bubbly, and fun. And she's been sharing with us her lived experience of borderline personality disorder, and also how she has used all her research, all her passions, you know, whether it's been an aerialist in the circus, whether it's a professor of Spelman College in philosophy. And it's just about bringing it all together and being herself. And of course, that isn't accepted in all circles, but tough. We need to explore and, yes, go and see different versions and different ways. And as you said, it's so important that somebody with whatever whatever the label is, shares how it really is, because people from the outside can only assume they know.
Yeah, it's interesting how there are some people who are extreme, like they are the canon. They are the people that you must read. They are the people who give all the talks. And they have these, they'll write all these books, and then at the end they have all these chapters about, autism and the extent to which people have chapters on schizophrenia when they are not schizophrenic is wild. It's like, how do you know what the emotional experience of a schizophrenic person is? Do you even know anyone who's schizophrenic? You know what I mean? Or the extent to which, like, there are major people in the field who will talk about people with borderline disorder, personality disorder, and they will use them as examples, and they will say these horrific things about them, knowing that I'm there. And I'm like, you know me.
Hello, I'm here.
We had lunch yesterday, and
Yes.
now you're describing people with my diagnosis as extremely combative to the point of being unable to interact with. And we had a pleasant lunch. Like, what are they doing? And yeah, so it's just, it blows my mind.
Very, yes, but we just got to keep on doing your bit, and slowly we change it. We put back each little starfish one at a time. So for you, what is the future? What other passions are popping up? What else are you wanting to do?
Well, I have recently had a big health change. After I'm still in the medical testing process for more specific kinds of things, but I have been diagnosed with a progressively degenerative nerve disorder, and it is characterized by excruciating pain. Like that is its definition of progressively excruciating pain. So that was a hard thing to deal with, and I was getting diagnosed with this obviously because I was having symptoms. And that means that all of my activities I had to give up about a year and a half ago. And then there are other things that come along with that disorder, because the nerves that I have that are degenerating for me are the small fiber nerves, which means not only is it the pain and temperature nerves in my skin, but it is the small nerves in my blood vessels and in my heart and in my eyes and in my ear. And I'm having all of these other related health issues related to, so it's like your autonomic nervous system, the involuntary part of your muscles and your control. So I'm having those chronic illness issues, right? So fatigue, I've been able to find, that if I take some Adderall, I can wake up and get out of bed much of the time. So I just went through a 4-day spell where I couldn't get out of bed and I couldn't lift my head. So like our interview was always in my mind tentative, because I never know how I'm going to wake up and feel.
You don't know whether you're going to come along or not.
I don't. Yeah, it's you, and it's hour by hour as well. So it can change at any point. And I'm still I can't read right now because neurologically my eyes are doing things that it's not communicating with my brain well. And so I can't read. I can't look at things. So like I can't read, I can't look out the windshield when I drive. I have to look and drive. So I'm doing everything out of my peripheral vision right now. And it's causing a lot of dizziness. It's adding to the fatigue. It's really complicated. And it's very possible that this got triggered by COVID, because I had COVID 3 times, and the 3 times that I had COVID, I had the symptoms that I have now. So I didn't have the coughing and the sneezing and the fever and any of these things. I had the severe dizziness and the severe fatigue and the inability to stand up and like the inner ear issues. And I keep, right now I'm going through a lot of vestibular stuff, neuro-ophthalmology to figure out what's going on with my eye-brain communication. Still working on the fatigue issue. I think that's just going to be what it is, and hopefully I can make it through my teaching days. But I am tomorrow going to get screened for a clinical trial for long COVID and the effect of long COVID on the autonomic nervous system. So I could qualify. I have to pass a certain kind of test that I'm not sure if I have that symptom or not, because they're looking for something very specific. So I have to go through a bunch of tests tomorrow to see. But otherwise, I'd be doing a year of clinical trial, which is scary because I could get a placebo. But if I got the real thing, it could help me a lot for many of the things. And then if not, the woman knows the person who runs like a long COVID research place, and she was like, I think I can get you in there. I'm being very optimistic. I'm multiple MRIs and CTs and so I don't know. It's kind of hard to explain to everybody what's going on to me because it was so much time fighting with male doctors that kept telling me nothing was wrong with me. And then me just going to different doctors and being like, you don't know what you're doing. I'm going to a different doctor, and like researching all these doctors to find out who would listen to me. So it was like all of that. And then when I got a diagnosis, I was like, now I need to figure out what kind of testing I can do to see if there's any kind of symptomatic management. Because we didn't know how to manage my symptoms because we didn't know what was wrong with me. And so now we know what's wrong with me. And so we're trying to test out things for the symptoms. So it will have been probably over 2 years of me having excellent health insurance and the ability to do the medical institutions full time and the ability to do my own medical research. And it will still take over 2 years for me to probably get settled in terms of like knowing what can be treated or not, and then having diagnoses, which means, and also like my job flexibility, and I'm constantly thinking about all of the primarily women who lose their jobs because they don't have the time to take off work to go to all these doctors, and then they get so sick that they can't go to work anymore, and then they lose their jobs, and then when they lose their jobs, they lose their health insurance. So then they can no longer go to doctors anyways, and then they're so sick and they don't have a job, they lose their housing. And then sometimes they lose their child custody because they're too sick to
Then they
care.
can't look after their children. Yeah.
So, and I just think like all of these doctors just throw so many people in the trash can so quickly, and that people's whole lives become ruined. There are people who have what I have that have certain kinds of causes that can be treated very easily and it will make it go away. You just have to find a doctor who will believe you and who will know to treat you, like test you for these kinds of things. And they could like get it, and they could get these tests, and then they could get the medication for it, and it would go away and they would recover instead. And then if you have these kinds of causes and you don't treat them, the pain from the progression is like exponentially more than mine will ever be. They live unbearably painful lives. And like these are things that can just completely be avoided if doctors weren't like, oh, this doesn't fit my little checklist. Okay, bye. And so I just am always so grateful that I even have gotten this far, even if I don't get much further. And even if I do have to go on disability, like I do have diagnoses that might be able to help me try to get some state disability. But I think about it all the time. And I think about how many people are homeless. Like how many people are homeless? Because the big medicine is so difficult to navigate, and the doctors are so lazy and they're so biased against so many kinds of patients that people's lives are just over. And so my therapist always tries to tell me that I should not be so hard on myself, that I have the luck that I can keep trying to treat myself. Um,
But I also hear you there in the advocating for people who can't. So it's, and we hold you in your diagnosis, and we know that it's not easy. And we're praying that there is a solution for you, and that, yeah, and your advocacy also is able to be the voice for so many other people.
it is
So
true.
it's
I
not like
can't.
you're just going to go, oh, this is just me, there again. And it's affecting and impacting what you've always done, and your love of movement, and your writing articles and all that. But it's also about seeing, okay, how do you do it differently? What about audio? Because you're speaking beautifully. Yeah, and it's just about seeing that we hope that you will always have the energy and the love and the passion to go and find solutions, not only for yourself, but so many others.
I've found that emotionally, especially given that I have borderline, the support groups are not for me, because they are places where people need to share their pain and I
Yes,
can't handle it. But what I have done and what I do, and maybe I don't have any right to do this because I'm a different kind of doctor, but I'll go through the Facebook posts and I'll go through the Reddit posts and I'll just be reading and seeing like who's got my experience or what are people, and I'll see people start posting things and they're like, I don't know what to do, and da, 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 da. And I'm like, I know what you do. You go and you ask for a skin biopsy because you have the symptoms of small fiber and you can get an objective test for this. And once you do that, then you need to get a neuroimmunologist
yes,
and you need to get tested for these sorts of antibodies. And if you know how to ask for it, then they won't be able to tell you no. And if they tell you no, then you can just find a doctor who will trust you. So I start like giving people, I'm like, this sounds like autonomic dysfunction. You need to find a cardiologist who can handle these kinds of things. And there are
yeah,
certain kinds of certifications that you have to find. So like I'm going through like social media and I'm combing to find people who sound like they have this thing and they're just being run around the medical institutions and thrown out over and over again. And I'm like, they don't know what to ask for and they don't know what to look for. And I'm like,
yeah,
here's all of the things that I did. Just go in and ask for these tests, and then you need to do it in this order. And make sure that you're very clear and you say it this way, because I'm just like, I need to help. I need to help people. I
yeah.
need to take all I've learned, all of the things that I've learned all this time, and I need to share it with as many people as possible to try to help as many people as possible. And I get really emotional about this because I'm like, somebody's got to help these people, and I'm lucky. And if I
Yeah.
don't use this knowledge that I've gained
To
through
make it
all of
easier
this,
for other people. Yes.
yeah.
So at
So
least
it
they
is
don't have
important
to
for me. I
wade
can't,
through.
yeah,
Yes.
I can't advocate in a real way because these are like, they're just Facebook groups of people who've been thrown away. So like there are no places where you can really advocate for them in a more public kind of sense. Um, but people really are trying to help. They're trying to help each other. They're
Yeah.
advocating for each other with each other. And so it's a beautiful, devastating space.
Yeah. Okay, so
Right.
we've reached the end of our interview already. And so yes, from me and the radio station, and obviously all of our listeners, we send you much love and lots of strength, and knowing that your solution is out there, and also respecting that you haven't just collapsed in a heap. You're out there changing things. And I know that, often we also get to ends of chapters and we think, oh, okay, but it's also understanding that this is the beginning of a new chapter for you.
Yes. And hopefully I'll be able to get enough symptom management to take this further, because I know that if I can find some way to continue on, this will be where I'm going. This will be my next pursuit.
So yes, knowing that if the trial is meant for you, you will get it, and it'll make a massive difference. So thank you for coming to talk to us.
Thank you for having me.
All right, so you have been listening to Professor Shay Welch. She has been sharing her lived experience with us. She's been brought all different aspects and sides of her, you know, from being in the circus to being a professor of philosophy. And yes, has also shared her lived experience of her own health challenges. And we wish her much love and huge healing. You've been listening to Healthcare Hour with Colleen Qvist. Remember that you are loved, you matter, and you're not alone. We'll see you all next week.
The home of inspiration every day.
Most people give up on themselves easily. You know the human spirit is powerful.
From news,
Countries across the globe have been hit by the COVID-19 virus.
views,
There's a global trend to see an increase in GBV incidences, specifically domestic violence.
sports,
What's he say? It's a really good ball. It's Shabalala.
and music to inspire you every day. This is Vuka Online, your inspiration radio station.